On a chilly evening, the sounds of an old violin echoed through the crowded streets of downtown. An elderly man, with deep lines etched on his face, stood at the corner of a busy intersection, playing a tune that seemed to speak of years of hardship and resilience. His name was Albert, and for as long as anyone could remember, he had been playing his violin on this street corner. Despite the years of music, his performance was met with few coins and fewer smiles. As Albert played, a group of young strangers walked by, laughing loudly. One of them, a man with a smug smile, tossed a coin into Albert's violin case and sneered, "Is this really your idea of music?" The group snickered as Albert's shoulders slumped. The man continued, mocking, "You should find a real job, old man." The cruel words stung, and Albert's hands trembled as he kept playing, refusing to let the insult stop his music. Just then, a calm voice cut through the noise. "That's enough." Keanu Reeves, dressed in a simple jacket, stepped into the scene. The young man turned, surprised to see the Hollywood actor standing in front of him. Keanu's gaze was steady, his voice unwavering. "There's no need to treat someone like that," he said, looking at Albert with a kind smile. The young man scoffed, ready to brush it off, but Keanu's words held weight. "How would you feel if you were being laughed at in front of everyone?" he asked, his tone firm but not angry. The group of strangers grew quiet, unsure of how to respond. Albert, still playing his violin, felt a warmth spread through him. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't invisible. Are you curious about what happens next? Hold on tight, because the story takes a turn you won't expect. The group of strangers walked off, their laughter silenced by Keanu's words, but Albert couldn't shake the feeling of being humiliated. He had been playing music for years, pouring his soul into each note, only to be dismissed as nothing more than a joke. Keanu stood beside him, watching the young man's retreating figure. "You didn't deserve that," Keanu said softly, turning to Albert. The elderly man looked up at him, his eyes filled with gratitude but also a deep sadness. "It's been like this for so long," Albert whispered. "People look right through me." Keanu nodded, his eyes understanding. "Sometimes the world forgets the worth of those who give without expecting anything in return," he said. Keanu paused, taking a deep breath. "But it doesn't have to be like that." Albert looked at Keanu, wondering if someone like him could ever truly understand the struggles of someone like him. Keanu gave a small, reassuring smile. "The world can be a lot kinder than it seems," he said. "You just have to keep playing your music." Albert hesitated but then nodded, a spark of hope flickering in his eyes. As Keanu started to walk away, he turned back once more. "I'll be back. Keep playing." It was a simple promise, but one that meant the world to Albert. What's going to happen next? Keep watching, because things are about to change. The next week, Albert returned to the same corner, his violin case open as usual. He wasn't expecting much. He had learned not to hope for too much over the years. But as he began to play, something felt different. People started stopping. Some even dropped bills into his case, offering nods of approval. Albert kept playing, but his mind kept wandering back to Keanu's words. Was it possible that kindness could truly make a difference? Then, just as the sun was setting, he saw a familiar face approaching. Keanu Reeves was back, walking towards him with a warm smile. Albert's heart skipped a beat. "I told you I'd be back," Keanu said, settling down beside him. A few moments passed, and the two of them simply sat there, listening to the sound of Albert's violin. The crowd around them seemed to grow, some even standing in awe at the beautiful music. Keanu turned to Albert. "You see that? People are listening. They hear you." Albert smiled faintly, but doubt still lingered. "They're only listening because you're here," he said softly. Keanu chuckled, shaking his head. "No, Albert, they're listening because you're playing." With renewed confidence, Albert began to play a new song, something he had never played before, a melody full of hope, something he had never allowed himself to believe in. As the last note lingered in the air, the crowd erupted in applause. What do you think will happen next? Stay with us. This story is far from over. Over the next few days, Albert's music began to draw larger crowds. Word had spread about the elderly street musician who had been publicly humiliated, but was now playing with more passion than ever. Some passers-by even recognized Keanu from the previous encounter, and as a result, the crowd grew even bigger. But this wasn't about fame or recognition for Albert. It was about the music, the dignity he had regained, and the kindness that had sparked it all. One afternoon, as Albert played a particularly emotional piece, a woman approached him. She was holding a camera. "I heard about you," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "I'm a producer for a local news outlet, and I'd love to do a feature on you." Albert felt a wave of shock and disbelief wash over him. "Me?" he asked, his voice trembling. "But I'm just a street musician." The woman smiled. "No, you're someone who has a story to tell, a story of resilience, and of someone who refused to let the cruelty of others define him." Albert didn't know what to say. He had always seen himself as invisible, but now people were seeing him. Keanu appeared from the crowd, giving Albert an encouraging nod. "You've got this," Keanu said. Albert took a deep breath, realizing that this was the moment he had been waiting for. He was no longer just the man with a violin. He was someone whose music had made people stop and listen. Can you imagine how Albert must have felt in that moment? You won't believe where this leads next. The feature on Albert aired a few weeks later, and the response was overwhelming. People from all over the city reached out, offering support, jobs, and even opportunities to perform in front of larger audiences. But what truly touched Albert was the personal messages he received. One in particular stood out, an invitation to play at a local charity event, where the proceeds would go to helping elderly musicians like him, who were struggling to be heard. Albert's heart swelled with gratitude. He had gone from being publicly humiliated to being celebrated, all because of the kindness of one person, Keanu Reeves. On the night of the event, Albert stood backstage, nervously holding his violin. Keanu appeared beside him, giving him a reassuring smile. "You've come a long way, Albert. I'm proud of you." Albert smiled, his heart full. He had found his voice again, not just in his music, but in life. When he took the stage and began to play, the crowd stood in awe, applauding after every note. Albert had become more than just a street musician. He had become a symbol of resilience and the power of kindness. If this story touched you, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Because sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can change a life in ways you never imagined.